Good morning, everybody. I'm Rich Gautier with Scott Graham, Michael Malai, and Deb Johnson is on today. Good morning, everybody. Today we're going to talk about something I put together on conflict, stakes, and purpose. And I call them the essential building blocks for screenplay conflict. And the three elements go together. They're intertwined. They work together to create a compelling and engaging narrative. And it's conflict. All right, it's the engine of the story. And conflict is the driving force of any story. And without it, there's no drama, there's no tension, and there's no comedy either without that. And there is really no reason for the audience to keep watching. So conflict can manifest in various ways. And I teach this in my comedy writing class, but it's also, of course, with any kind of art. So there's internal conflict, right? And that resides within a character, and it's struggle within like their own beliefs, their desires, their fears. And I always say, characters have to have flaws, so that's important. You could think of a character battling addiction, grappling with a moral dilemma, or overcoming their own insecurities. Um, an example could be like a shy person must overcome their fear of public speaking, like Mike we discussed.
Me.
Then you have external conflict, right? This involves a character struggle against outside forces, right? That could be another character, the antagonist. That could be nature, society, like in so many movies, a ticking clock, right? That's an external conflict. Um, Character versus character. Any kind of manhunter, detective hunts a cunning serial killer, right? Um, Character versus society, right? Individual challenges a corrupt political system. We've seen that a million times. The new thing, well, not new thing, but character versus technology. A hacker battles AI, or
I love that.
yeah. Well, there's so much, right? I mean, there's only 10 original ideas, right? We just keep recycling them and making them our own. It goes back to Shakespeare at times, probably back to Aristotle,
Yeah, yeah.
right? There's
Right.
relational conflict, power struggles, right? That could be disagreements, power struggles, misunderstandings.
Aristotle dishing all that out. I mean, the Greeks are the experts in conflict and argument. I go back to my time in Greece. I'm Greek, so I can say this, but it's like the Greeks just like have a talent at arguing every issue. So it's it's something I never got used to, but it is. It's the essence of conflict.
When I teach acting, I always tell my actors there's only, and Mike Nichols said this, the director and the actor, and I believe it. There's only three types of scenes. There's a negotiation, there's a seduction, and there's a fight. If you look at any scene, even as a writer or as an actor, it can be broken down into those three things. It's either negotiation, it's a fight, or a seduction. And that can tie into what I'm going over right now, right? Even relational conflict. It could be a disagreement, a power struggle, misunderstanding. So you have a brother and a sister are forced to work together to save the family business. That's a relational conflict. So there's considerations that you have to think of for conflict, right? And this even goes back to when I teach improv, because it has to be conflict in an improv comedy scene. And the worst thing you could do with improv comedy is talk about things that happened in the past. That's boring. So you want to keep things in the present. So when you're writing conflict, you should make it active. And conflict should never be passive, right? Characters should always be actively engaged in trying to overcome their obstacles. It's just boring.
Yeah.
We want to talk about the plane going down, or do we want to see the plane's going down right now, right? That's what's interesting, right? Because now you get now, and I call it, this is another big improv thing, but it's also a big writing thing. You want to show, don't tell, right? Because again, writing screenplays, writing television, it's a visual art, right? So you always want to show, don't tell.
Mhm.
right? Depict your conflict through actions, dialogue, and definitely reactions. Don't forget reactions. So much can be said without dialogue also. All right. Because what that's going to do is going to raise the stakes, right? Because then when the stakes are raised, we say what hangs in the balance, what's important here, right? Because then stakes answer the question always like, okay, so why should I care? Right? They represent what the character has to gain or lose as a result of the conflict, right? Because high stakes create tension and investment from the audience. Then the audience cares. Because the worst thing you can be is boring in any sort of art, right? And that's what I always tell my actors, during auditions. The worst thing you can do in audition is be boring. The worst thing you can do in a theater production is be boring. I'd rather them make the wrong choices in an audition. I'd rather them make the wrong choices in anything, but don't be boring.
I mean, look at even in what we watch today. A lot of the movies of the past from the 1950s and 1960s, though I love a lot of them, they you know modern audiences get very bored because there's a lot of entering and walking in and walking out, and how they got there, driving, nothing really happening, you know the act of showing a car driving down the road, and there's nothing really happening until they get to the location, and they open the door. I mean, so much of that is eliminated. Just like in our screenplay format, you know, you know, we quit saying fade to, you know, cut to. You don't say that unless it's absolutely necessary for a smash cut or something. You don't put any of that in there. None of that's there anymore,
Yeah,
and it buys pages.
yeah, that's all changed too. Yeah, yeah. For physical stakes, these involve the character's physical well-being, safety, or even, life. It's important to have the stakes have to raise. If the hero fails, he's gonna die or she's gonna die. Emotional stakes, right? The character's feelings, their relationships, their psychological well-being, all those stakes have to be, raised. And again, that's going to tie into the conflict. Right? If the protagonist doesn't succeed, they will lose the love of their life. That's an emotional stake. Right? There's so many different stakes. There's professional stakes, right? If the character doesn't, if they involve the character's career, right? If this character doesn't do this certain thing, they're going to lose their career or they're going to lose their community. You know, if the chef doesn't win the prestigious competition, they're going to lose the restaurant, and the restaurant then is going to lose the community or some stuff. Just making it up, but
The
you know,
reputation, yeah.
the more personal the stakes are for the character, the more the audience will connect, the more the reader will connect, right? So then you have the third one, right? Because I said there's three: purpose, and that's the why behind the what. So purpose provides the motivation for the characters, and that drives the actions within the conflict. So it answers the question, what do the characters want to achieve? For actors, that's called their objective, right? What do the characters want to achieve? Right. So all your characters, this is a lot and a half hour. I know it is. But
We got a book that's pending. It's got like 30 chapters in it.
all
On
your
conflict.
characters when you write must have a super objective. And what that means is from page 1 to page 100 or 120, whatever you're writing, that character has to have an arc, right? And they want something on page 1, and that arc should go to the last page for their super objective. What do they want for the end of the movie? So that's a super objective, right? That helps them with their purpose. What do they want? What is their individual goal or desire? And that's going to motivate the character. And that could be conscious or unconscious, but they really have to have something. That's what the actors play. An example is a detective's purpose to find justice for the victim. Okay. They can have a narrative purpose. Right? This is the overall reason for the story being told. right? What is the central question for the narrative explorer? So what is the message or the theme? What does that convey, right? But there has to be a purpose, right? Just make it believable, right? Because the character's motivations, you know the character, you're writing it, right? Just make the character's motivations understandable and consistent with their personalities and the circumstances, right? And just connect it to the conflict and the stakes, right? Because all characters are going to have a purpose, right? And all three of these elements just they work in synergy, right?
Yeah.
So conflict creates obstacles and prevents characters from achieving their purpose. So conflict creates obstacles that prevent characters from achieving their purpose. Then stakes highlight what the characters stand to lose if they fail to overcome the conflict and achieve their purpose. So conflict creates obstacles that prevent characters from achieving their purpose. Stakes highlight what the characters stand to lose if they fail to overcome the conflict and achieve their purpose. And then purpose, what that does, it provides the motivation for characters to engage with the conflict and risk the stakes. If that makes sense. Any questions? That's a lot in a half hour.
Can you repeat that purpose line again?
The last one, purpose provides the motivation, right? Because that's what their objective, for characters to engage with the conflict, right? The conflict that you created, and then that in turn risks the stakes. So that gives them a purpose to risk those stakes. This could be a big class on
Go
this.
ahead, I'm sorry. I was just gonna ask another question. I'm like, I refer to my own writing and I'm checking off in my head, yeah, I did that, I did that, I did that. I'm thinking of my recent script. But I guess my question is, I guess it just has to be vetted. It has to, somebody has to read it and acknowledge that it's there. Like I can say, I know it's there, but
That's why. How many drafts have you done?
oh gosh,
Couple.
maybe 20.
That's the biggest. That's how many drafts do people usually say they wrote? Oh gosh, let me see. That's the biggest answer out of. That's a good answer. How
I
many
mean,
drafts?
I
Oh
can,
gosh.
on my computer, I say I'm on draft 12, but I mean, there's been a lot of
I understand.
reworking.
Yeah, well, that's what I like to do with our rewrites when we go back and do numerous drafts. That's when I start looking at this stuff.
Mhm,
So, do all my characters, the main characters, have objectives and super objectives?
mhm,
You know, because when you have a character has it gets even worse for some writers and actors. But for, if a character who your lead characters have from page 1 to page 100, they have a super objective. Each scene that they're in, right? Those objectives should lead to the super objective when you write.
mhm,
So that's where you get your character arc.
mhm, mhm,
And that's what actors look for also. Oh, this objective. So they're creating the objective based on the writing. So they're looking for, okay, this objective and this scene will lead to this objective, to lead to this objective, to lead to this. They're looking to create an arc to that super objective.
mhm,
So as a writer, you want to try and look for that when you're creating characters too, that each scene is leading to what you want them to, you want to get them to that, what you want them to get to that super objective. Are all your scenes leading to that super objective for them to try and, to try and find that? That's what I try to do. But I'm also an actor, so that's why I know I'm looking for that for them too.
mhm, mhm. And I think it's there's so much in what you're saying, and it's very difficult to do, but it's all right there. And I think I'm toying with a new script that I'm starting, but if I don't have this at its core, then I'm lost.
Well, I'm sure you have conflict. I'm sure you have conflict in your story. I know you have conflict,
Yeah.
right? I know you have characters, so you know, is the character, what kind of conflict does the character have? External, internal?
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure you have that,
Yep.
right?
Oh,
Right? What are the stakes?
mm-hmm.
Right? Are they emotional stakes for your lead characters? Are they physical stakes?
Mm-hmm.
Right? Then I'm sure you have purpose.
Mm-hmm.
What is the purpose? What is the why behind the what?
Mm-hmm.
Right? What is the character purpose? What is their individual goals? Why do why must they get those goals? So I'm sure it's there.
Mm-hmm.
But that's when Mike and I really start getting deep is in our third, fourth, fifth drafts when we start really looking to make sure we've done this. We don't worry too much about it in our first or second drafts. We just write to write. We know where we want to go with the stories. We just go, hey, this is good. Let's do this. So that we wrap it out, then we write it.
And sometimes we beat up a scene like over and over and over before we move on. And then we come back later and beat it up again.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
it depends on the scene. I mean, it's always it's really hard sometimes to say to remove yourself and say, hey, look at it through the viewer's eyes, through the reader's eyes.
Right.
What are they seeing? Are they seeing what I'm seeing? Am I
Mhm.
conveying my message
Yeah.
properly?
We don't worry about that early because or else we never
Right.
word. So we just tell our story with our characters, understanding everything that we want to say,
Mhm.
and then we go back, and then we
Yeah.
start getting deep. Then we're like, okay,
And
inciting
then start looking for
is our inciting incident right? Is our first 5 pages where we want it to be? Is our ending where then we start? That's why writing is rewriting.
Mm-hmm.
Writing is not writing a movie. Anybody can do that. It's writing is sitting that down, and the real work begins then.
Right.
So
Agree. Yeah.
I'm sure you have all that.
Yeah.
Just got to fine tune it and make sure you're saying it and making sure everything you want to say through those characters is coming through. It's your script.
Right. Yeah.
Make sure, I mean, as you go back through it, you could view it and find the point of each scene and say, and write that point down and see if you hit all those points in your story, or if you
Mhm.
left anything out, or if there's something else you need to add in.
Mhm.
That's always cool to say, hey, this is the purpose of this scene. This is the purpose of that scene.
Right.
The whole Chekhov's gun type theory, the guns in a scene, it has to be used.
Mhm.
Did that get it
Right.
to the next scene? Everything, if it doesn't propel the story, get rid of it.
Mhm.
Getting to your overall message. It's like I see that a lot with nonlinear narratives, where there's like 3 or 4 different stories going on at the same time and you're following everybody. That's exciting to write. That's fun to write. But it's like, hey, without confusing the audience or yourself, getting all those stories across at the same time.
I
Um,
hate writing. I hate writing that way. I can't. That's too, I.
Mhm.
He loves it. I don't like it.
yeah, it's like I channel my ADD.
It's too confusing for me. I'm not that smart.
I was in a movie called
Oh
The
no.
Death of Michael Smith,
Here we go.
and it was three,
There we go. That's the Michael Smith story.
yeah, three different stories going on at the same time, and the way the director did it, Dan Casey, it was really well done. So it kept everybody wondering what was happening, but watching him write it when he wrote it, it was pretty amazing.
Yeah, you got to be. I don't like just. Yeah, we've never written one together like that.
Yeah, we did.
We did.
Yeah, I think we've written a couple like that. I
Oh,
mean, definitely
non-linear.
definitely potty time. There's a lot of stories going on. What I mean?
I guess.
Not to mention all the stories during Nickel and Dime. Those. I guess you could say Italy Boys. You got the different characters all living their lives at the same time, and their motivations are showing.
But I'm saying they're living it at the same time. They're not going.
Yeah,
Michael
but
Smith, they were
but
going
we're
back. Weren't they
but you
going back and forth, like back in
Yeah,
time?
there was flashbacks going back and forth where it's like saying, okay, this happened back in the past, but this is happening now.
Yeah.
Getting that across, with so many eyes on the script and so many producers and so many opinions, it's hard to keep a track in your head, keep
Yeah.
track of
Yeah.
it.
We've
You
done
know,
it. We've done it.
yeah, it can be done.
Of course, that could be done. Yeah, so that's what I got for you
Please.
guys today.
Thank you. That's really interesting.
Excellent.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys. I'm sorry I wasn't more present, but I listened and